I've never liked water, not the deep kind anyway. Showers are fine, baths are tolerable, but anything where my feet can't touch the bottom? That's where I draw the line. It started when I was 7, at a community pool in Denver. Some older kids thought it would be funny to push the scared little girl into the deep end. I still remember the burning in my lungs, the way the chlorinated water seemed to press in from all sides, how the pool's blue bottom looked impossibly far away as I sank. A lifeguard pulled me out, but the damage was done. 36 years later, I still felt that pressure in my chest whenever I got near deep water. So when my sister Candace suggested we take the kids to Willow Creek Park for our annual family reunion, I almost said no. "It's perfect," she'd insisted over the phone, her voice bright with that eldest sister certainty that had been bossing me around since we were kids. "Pavilions for the older folks, playground for the kids, and that pretty creek for wading. The water's only knee-deep, Deb. Even you can handle knee-deep." Knee-deep. That was the phrase that convinced me. Knee-deep I could handle. Knee-deep was just a very mobile puddle. It was the second Saturday in June, one of those perfect Colorado days where the sky seems impossibly blue and the air smells like pine and possibility. The kind of day that makes you forget that anything bad could ever happen. 3 generations of the Hawthorne family had gathered. 47 of us in total, from my grandmother's sister Ethel, 92, and still sharp as a tack, down to baby Josiah, just 6 months old and drooling on everything in reach. The park was exactly as Candace had described. Tall cottonwoods dropped pools of shade, their leaves whispering in the breeze. The air was a perfect mix of summer. Hamburgers sizzling on the grill, freshly cut grass, and the faint, cool mineral tang from the creek. Purple and gold balloons, our grandmother's high school colors that had somehow become the family standard, bobbed from the pavilion rafters, silent and festive. I was manning the condiment station, making sure we didn't run out of mustard for the hot dogs, listening to Uncle Pete tell the same story about his glory days playing minor league baseball. I'd heard it roughly 47 times, but there was something comforting about the familiar rhythm of his words, the predictable punchline about the umpire who needed glasses. That's when I heard it, the sound that every parent, aunt, or uncle knows in their bones, a child's scream that isn't playing, isn't laughing, but pure fear. "Help! Somebody help! She's in the water!" I turned toward the creek, maybe 30 yards from our pavilion, and saw my nephew Damon, all of 7 years old, standing at the water's edge, pointing and screaming. His face was white with terror, his Minecraft t-shirt wet from where he'd clearly tried to go in himself before realizing he couldn't. My blood went cold when I realized what he was pointing at. A small figure in a yellow sundress being swept downstream by water that was supposed to be only knee-deep. Later, I'd learned that the late spring snowmelt had turned our gentle creek into something much more dangerous. The water that was usually 18 inches deep was now 3 feet in places and moving fast, really fast. The recent rains had also changed the creek bed, creating unexpected deep spots and stronger currents. The Park Service had put up warning signs, but they were small, easy to miss if you weren't looking. The little girl, I could see her dark hair plastered to her head, her arms flailing desperately, was already 20 feet from where she must have fallen in, and the current was carrying her toward where the creek narrowed and went under a low bridge. The bridge was maybe 100 feet away. If she went under there, where the water compressed and sped up, I dropped the mustard bottle. It hit the concrete with a splat, yellow spreading like a crime scene. But I was already running. Other people were running too. I could hear voices shouting, feet pounding on grass. My brother-in-law Robert's voice rose above the others. "Someone call 911!" But I was closest. My legs, suddenly remembering the discipline of 3 marathons, knew what to do even as my brain screamed warnings. I was moving before I'd made a choice, propelled by an instinct older and deeper than fear. "I can't swim!" I yelled to whoever might be listening. It seemed important that someone know this, in case I didn't make it out. "I can't swim, but I'm going in!" The water hit me like a physical blow, a shock of liquid winter that stole my breath. The current wasn't just strong, it was intentional, grabbing at my ankles, trying to wrench my feet from the slippery rocks below. It was a river of muscle, and all of it was flexing against me. The bottom was slippery with algae-covered rocks, treacherous and shifting. Each step was a negotiation with gravity and current. The water that was supposed to be knee-deep was already at my thighs, and I wasn't even in the main channel yet. My jeans, the comfortable, worn ones I always wore to family events, became lead weights the moment they got wet. Each step felt like an argument with gravity. But I could see her, maybe 15 feet away now, her yellow dress bright against the dark water like a distress beacon. She was trying to grab at rocks, at overhanging branches, but her hands were too small, the current too strong. "I'm coming!" I shouted, not sure if she could hear me over the rush of water. "Hold on, sweetheart, I'm coming." She turned her face toward me, and I saw pure terror in those brown eyes. She couldn't have been more than 5, maybe 6. The same age as my niece Sophie, who was safe on the playground, oblivious to the drama unfolding. The current had her, was playing with her like a cat with a toy, spinning her, dunking her, pulling her under and letting her bob back up. Her dress had ballooned with trapped air, keeping her somewhat afloat, but I could see the fabric starting to sink as it saturated. I pushed forward, the water now at my waist. Each step was a battle against the current. I had to lean upstream at an almost 45-degree angle, using my body weight to brace against the flow. My foot slipped on a rock covered in slime, and for a terrifying second, I thought I was going down. My arms windmilled wildly, and I managed to catch myself on a partially submerged branch. 10 feet, 8 feet, I could almost reach her. That's when she went under completely, pulled down by an eddy near a large rock. The next few seconds exist in my memory like a series of still photographs. The circle of ripples where she'd disappeared. The yellow fabric, just visible beneath the surface. My own hands, reaching. The decision that wasn't really a decision at all. I dove forward. The water closed over my head, cold, dark, powerful. Every nightmare I'd ever had about drowning came rushing back. I was 7 years old again, sinking in that chlorinated pool, lungs burning. But my hand touched fabric. Soft cotton, slippery with water. I grabbed hold and pulled with everything I had, planting my feet on the rocky bottom and surging upward. We broke the surface together, the little girl coughing and sputtering but alive. She was heavier than I'd expected, waterlogged and limp with shock. But she was breathing. That's all that mattered. "I've got you!" I gasped, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "You're okay, I've got you!" She clung to me with desperate strength, her small arms locked around my neck so tightly I could barely breathe. But the current had us both now, and I realized with a sick certainty that I had no idea how to get us back to shore. We were being swept downstream fast, the bridge looming closer. I could see the dark mouth where the water funneled under, could hear the hollow echo of rushing water in a confined space. "Hold on to me," I managed to gasp. "Arms around my neck, legs around my waist, like a piggyback ride!" She adjusted her grip, and I felt her whole body trembling against mine. With her weight added to mine and my complete lack of swimming ability, I knew we were in serious trouble. I tried to angle toward shore, but the current was too strong. My feet could barely touch bottom now, just enough to push off occasionally, but not enough to stop our downstream progress. 30 feet to the bridge, 25. I could see people running along the bank, heard someone yell, "Grab the branch!" But the branches were out of reach, and I couldn't let go of the girl to grab them anyway. Just as I felt my own strength failing, a hand clamped onto my bicep. It wasn't just a hand, it was an anchor, strong, sure, and connected to a man who looked as rooted as the trees on the bank. "I've got you!" His voice cut through the roar of the water, calm and steady. "Angle toward me. Let the current do the work." Then another hand grabbed his, and another grabbed that one. I saw my brother-in-law Robert, his face a mask of determination, and behind him strangers, a woman in running gear, 2 older fishermen, their hands linked, their feet planted. A human chain was forming, reaching from the safety of the shore into the cold, fast heart of the creek to pull us out. "All right?" The man's voice was calm but full of authority. "I teach water rescue. We're going to sidestep toward shore. Small steps. Don't fight the current. Work with it. Let it push us diagonal." More hands joined the chain. I caught a glimpse of my brother-in-law Robert, my teenage nephew Carter, strangers whose faces I didn't recognize but whose grip meant everything. A woman in running gear. A teenager with a skateboard abandoned on the bank. 2 older men who looked like they'd been fishing. The chain grew stronger, pulled harder. "That's it," Simon encouraged. "Feel how the current wants to push? We use that. Step, brace, step, brace." Step by agonizing step, we moved toward shore. The little girl never loosened her grip, her face buried in my neck. I could feel her heart racing against my chest, a hummingbird trapped between us. The bridge got closer, but the shore got closer too. It was going to be close. My foot found a stable rock, then another. The water dropped to waist level, then thigh. Then we were stumbling onto muddy bank, collapsing on the grass, the little girl still attached to me like she'd been glued there. Someone wrapped us in a blanket that smelled like car trunk and safety. I could hear sirens in the distance, that beautiful wailing that meant help was coming. "Layla, oh God, Layla, my baby!" A woman's voice, broken with terror and relief. She came running from upstream where she must have been frantically searching the wrong direction. She was young, maybe mid-20s, wearing a sundress that matched her daughter's. Her feet were bare, bleeding from running on rocks. She'd clearly been in the water too, searching. The little girl, Layla, turned from my neck and reached for her mother, who gathered her up like she might never let go again. They collapsed together on the grass, both sobbing. "She slipped," the mother was explaining to everyone and no one. "I was getting sunscreen from the bag just for a second. She was collecting pretty rocks at the edge and she slipped on moss and the current just took her. I jumped in but I couldn't. The water was too fast. I couldn't reach her. I couldn't save my baby." "She's okay," I managed to say through chattering teeth. The adrenaline was wearing off and I was starting to shake violently. "She's okay now." "You saved her," the mother said, looking at me with eyes that held too much emotion to process. "You saved my baby. I don't even know your name." "Deborah," I said. "Deborah Hawthorne. And I had help." I gestured to the human chain that had saved us both. The paramedics arrived, efficient and calm, checking Layla first. They wrapped her in special blankets, took her temperature, checked her oxygen levels. Then they turned to me, despite my protests that I was fine. "Mild hypothermia," the younger paramedic announced after checking me over. "Bruised ribs, various abrasions. You need to warm up slowly. Hospital would be best." "I'm fine," I insisted, but my violently chattering teeth undermined my argument. As they wrapped me in one of those metallic emergency blankets that made me look like a baked potato, Simon Whitfield sat down beside me on the grass. Up close, I could see he was wearing a faded t-shirt that read Riverview Aquatic Center. 27 years, teaching swimming and water rescue, he said quietly. "I've seen a lot of brave things, but what you did, going in without knowing how to swim, that's a different kind of courage entirely. Or stupidity," I suggested. "No," he said firmly. "Stupidity would have been going in without yelling for help first. You made sure people knew you were in trouble before you even hit the water. That gave us time to form the chain. You saved that girl, but you also gave us the chance to save you both." My family had surrounded us by then. My sister Candace was cry-hugging me, alternating between, "I'm so proud of you," and "Don't you ever scare me like that again." My mother had appeared with dry clothes from someone's car, clucking over me like I was 6 years old again. Damon, who'd raised the alarm, was being treated like a hero in his own right, which he was. "I saw her fall," he told anyone who'd listen, his young voice still shaky. "And I remembered what Mrs. Peterson said in safety assembly about getting help fast. And I remembered Aunt Debbie can't swim, so I knew she needed the grown-ups." The boy had probably saved both our lives with his quick thinking. Layla's mother, Nina, approached tentatively, her daughter on her hip. Up close, I could see they had the same eyes, the same determined chin, the same dark curls that were starting to dry in wild spirals. Layla wore someone's oversized Colorado Rockies t-shirt, her yellow sundress probably halfway to Wyoming by then. "I'm Nina Velasquez," she said, "and this brave girl is Layla. We just moved here from Texas. This was supposed to be our first fun weekend exploring Colorado." Her voice cracked. "I'm a terrible mother. I should have been watching better. You're not terrible," I interrupted. "Kids are fast. Accidents happen in seconds. What matters is she's safe." "Because of you," Nina insisted. "I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how to ever repay." "You don't repay," I said, echoing something my own mother had told me years ago. "You pass it on. Someday, somehow you help someone else. That's how it works." Layla peeked out from her mother's shoulder, studying me with those serious brown eyes. "You swimmed to get me," she said softly. "I did," I agreed, not bothering to correct her grammar. "But Mommy said you don't know how to swim." "I don't," I admitted. "But I knew how to reach you, and that was enough." She thought about this for a moment, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. "Thank you for reaching me," she said solemnly. "The water was too fast and too cold." "You're very welcome, sweetheart," I said, my throat suddenly tight. "You were very brave, too." "I wasn't brave," Layla said matter-of-factly. "I was scared. I thought I was going to go under the bridge and never come back." "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared," I told her, sharing a truth I'd just learned myself. "It means doing what needs to be done even when you are scared, and you held on, you kept fighting. That's brave." The afternoon turned into evening at the hospital. They insisted on keeping me for observation, making sure my core temperature came back up properly. The Velasquez family stayed too, even though Layla had been cleared within an hour. Nina said she couldn't leave without making sure I was okay. "You're family now," she said simply when I protested they didn't need to wait. "You saved my world. The least I can do is sit in an uncomfortable hospital chair for a few hours." Local news showed up, having heard about the rescue. The story of the human chain had captured everyone's imagination. They interviewed Simon, who deflected credit to everyone involved. "This is what community looks like," he told the reporter. "Neighbors helping neighbors, strangers becoming links in a chain of compassion. Ms. Hawthorne showed us all what courage means, and everyone else showed what humanity means." They wanted to interview me too, but I was too exhausted, too overwhelmed. Candace ran interference, her big sister bossiness finally useful. As evening fell and I was finally cleared to go home, Simon Whitfield found me again in the discharge area. "I've been thinking," he said. "Would you like to learn to swim? Properly this time, after what you did today. Someone with that kind of courage should know how to handle water safely." My immediate response was no. The fear was still there, decades old and deeply rooted. The memory of being pushed, of sinking, of water filling my lungs. It all felt fresh after today's adventure. But then I thought about Layla, about that moment when she went under, about how helpless I'd felt even after reaching her. What if there was a next time? What if I could have done more if I'd known how to swim? "Maybe," I said slowly. "Yeah, maybe it's time." Simon smiled. "I teach adult beginners every Tuesday evening at the Riverview Aquatic Center. Very shallow pool, no deep ends until you're ready, which might be never, and that's okay. Lots of patience. Several of my students are people who've had traumatic water experiences." "Do any of them voluntarily jump into creeks they can't swim in?" I asked wryly. "You'd be my first," he admitted. "But I have a feeling you're going to be my best student. Fear plus determination equals unstoppable." 3 weeks later, I stood at the edge of the Riverview pool, every muscle tense. The chlorine smell brought back memories of being 7, of going under, of panic. But Simon was patient, starting with just sitting on the edge, feet in the water. "We're reprogramming your brain," he explained, "creating new positive associations with water. No rush. We have all the time in the world." The class had 4 other adults, all with their own water fears. There was Harriet, in her 70s, who'd never learned because her mother had nearly drowned as a child and passed that fear down. Jorge, whose brother had died in a boating accident. Keiko, who'd been caught in a riptide once and never gone back in water. And Brendan, who just plain didn't like the feeling of not being in control. "Look at us," Harriet said during our 3rd lesson, as we practiced floating with pool noodles. "The terrified teaching the terrified, but we're doing it." By lesson 5, I could float on my back for 10 seconds. By lesson 10, I could dog paddle across the shallow end. It wasn't pretty, but it was swimming. Nina and Layla came to watch one evening. Layla had started her own swimming lessons at the same pool, turning her fear into determination to never be helpless in water again. "Watch, Miss Deborah," she called, then demonstrated a perfect starfish float. "I'm not scared anymore." "That's wonderful, sweetie," I called back, then managed my own clumsy float to show her I was trying too. After class, Nina and I sat in the lobby while Layla practiced her new skills in the kiddie pool, under the watchful eye of her instructor. "She talks about you all the time," Nina said. "Her teacher who saved her. She wants to be brave like you when she grows up." "She's already brave," I said. "She survived something terrifying and got back in the water. That's braver than what I did." "Don't do that," Nina said firmly. "Don't minimize what you did. You couldn't swim and you went in anyway. Do you understand how extraordinary that is? Most people would have waited for someone else, someone more qualified. You didn't wait, you just acted." "Instinct," I said, uncomfortable with the praise. "Love," Nina countered. "You didn't know Layla, but in that moment you loved her enough to risk everything. That's the kind of person you are. Own it." 3 months after the rescue, I was back at Willow Creek Park. The water level had returned to normal, just 18 inches of gentle flow. Simon was with me, along with our small swimming class. Adults who were facing their water fears together. "The key," Simon was saying, "is to respect the water without fearing it. Understand its power, work with it, not against it, and never ever be too proud to ask for help." I waded in slowly, feeling the familiar chill, the push of current against my legs. But this time, I knew what to do if I fell. This time I understood how to position my body, how to work with the water instead of panicking against it. "Miss D, Miss D!" I turned to see Layla running toward me, her mother close behind. They were both wearing bright yellow water shoes this time, and Layla had on a properly fitted life jacket. Nina waved, a huge smile on her face. "Are you going swimming?" Layla asked, splashing into the shallow water with the confidence of a child who'd replaced fear with knowledge. "Learning to," I said. "Want to watch?" For the next hour, Layla became my cheerleader as I practiced basic water safety techniques in the creek. She showed me her own new skills: how to sit down if you slip, how to point your feet downstream, how to call for help the right way. "My teacher says I'm a natural," she told me proudly, sounding out the word carefully. "But I said I'm only good because I practice. That's what you taught me. Being scared is okay if you practice being brave." Nina had joined us in the shallows, keeping a watchful but not paranoid eye on her daughter. "She insisted we come back here," Nina told me. "Said she needed to show the creek she wasn't scared of it anymore. Child psychology by a 6-year-old. "Smart kid," I said. "Takes after her hero," Nina replied with a wink. As the afternoon wore on, more people joined us in the creek. Some were from Simon's adult swimming class. Others were families who'd heard about our informal water safety gathering through social media. The Willow Creek Park Waders, someone had dubbed us, and the name stuck. The same spot where terror had struck 3 months ago became a place of learning, of overcoming fear, of community. Someone had donated a set of rescue ropes and stationed them at intervals along the creek. The Park Service had installed better signage about water conditions and safety. What had been a site of near tragedy was transformed into a place of education and empowerment. "You know what's funny?" I said to Simon as we packed up. "I spent 43 years afraid of water. Took about 43 seconds to forget that fear when it mattered." "Fears like that," he said, coiling a rope with practiced efficiency. "It seems so big until something bigger comes along. Love, necessity, the need to help someone. They're all stronger than fear. You just proved what I've always believed. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's fear plus love equals action." Layla ran up for one more hug before leaving, soaking my shirt in the process. "Thank you for saving me, Miss D," she said, as she had taken to doing every time she saw me. It had become our ritual. "Thank you for being brave, Layla," I responded, completing our script. But this time she added something new. "And thank you for learning to swim. Now you can save more people if you need to." "Hopefully I won't need to," I said, ruffling her damp hair. "But you will if you have to," she said with the certainty only a 6-year-old can muster. "Because that's what you do. You reach people who need reaching. From the mouths of babes, as they say." 6 months after the rescue, I passed my basic swimming certification. Nothing fancy. I wasn't about to join any swim teams or take up water polo, but I could keep myself afloat, could move through water with purpose instead of panic. I could, if needed, reach someone else who was drowning. Simon presented me with a certificate at a ceremony attended by my whole swimming class, the Velasquez family, and half my relatives. Candace cried, again. "I'm so proud of you," she said, hugging me tight. "You faced your biggest fear." "Second biggest," I corrected. My biggest fear was watching someone drown and not being able to help. That trumped everything else. I hung the certificate in my 3rd grade classroom, next to the thank you card Layla had made me with construction paper, glitter, and enthusiastic spelling. "Thank you for saving me," it read, decorated with drawings of stick figures holding hands in blue crayon water. My students were fascinated by the story, especially the part about being afraid but doing it anyway. We talked a lot that year about different kinds of courage. The courage to try new things, to admit when you're scared, to help others even when it's hard, to learn from our fears instead of being controlled by them. One student, Kelvin, who wore bow ties every day and spoke like a tiny professor, was terrified of the class pet hamster. By the end of the year, inspired by our discussions about facing fears, he was the hamster's primary caretaker. "If you could jump in the creek, I can hold Mr. Whiskers," he'd declared with 8-year-old logic that somehow made perfect sense. "That's exactly right," I'd told him. "Courage comes in all sizes." The Velasquez family and I stayed close. Nina and I became genuine friends, bonding over coffee and the shared experience that had brought us together. She was a graphic designer who worked from home, and we'd often meet at parks. Always with water nearby, always watching Layla practice her growing swimming skills. "I never thanked you properly," Nina said one afternoon, as we watched Layla teach another child how to float. Not just for saving her life, but for showing her how to save herself. The swimming lessons were her idea, you know. The day after the accident, she asked when she could learn to swim like a fish, so the water could never take her away again. "Kids are resilient," I said. "When they have examples to follow," Nina countered, "you showed her that fear is just another obstacle to overcome. That's a gift beyond measure." The first anniversary of the rescue, the park held a water safety day. Simon coordinated it, but the whole community pitched in. Free swimming lessons were offered. The local fire department demonstrated water rescue techniques. A survivor of a childhood drowning incident spoke about the importance of water safety education. Layla and I did a demonstration together, showing how far we'd both come. She swam like a little dolphin while I managed a respectable freestyle across the creek pool that had been set up for the event. 1 year ago, Simon told the gathered crowd, Deborah Hawthorne couldn't swim, but she didn't let that stop her from saving a life. Today, she's not just a swimmer. She's an inspiration to everyone who's ever thought I can't, was the end of the story. She proved it's just the beginning. They unveiled a plaque by the creek that day. I'd protested when I heard about it, but they'd done it anyway. It didn't mention me by name, which I appreciated. Instead, it read, "In this place, ordinary people did extraordinary things. When someone needed help, a community became a chain. Remember, courage is fear that said its prayers and jumped in anyway." "I helped write it," Layla announced proudly. "The last part was my idea." "It's perfect," I told Perfect, I told her, and it was. 3 years have passed since that June day. I still teach 3rd grade, still can't swim particularly well, still feel a flutter of old fear when I see deep water. But I also still wade into Willow Creek every summer, teaching new groups of adults that it's never too late to learn, never too late to transform fear into respect. Layla is 9 now, on her school's swim team, cutting through water like she was born to it. She wants to be a lifeguard when she's old enough, wants to save people like I saved her. She doesn't remember being afraid of water anymore, which Nina says is both a blessing and a worry. She's fearless now, Nina told me recently. I have to remind her that the water deserves respect, not conquest. She'll find the balance, I assured her. Smart kids always do. My nephew Damon, the boy who sounded the alarm, is 10 now and has decided he wants to be a paramedic. He volunteers as a junior water safety assistant at the park during summers, teaching younger kids about creek safety. The ripples from that day continue to spread. Sometimes I stand by the creek and watch the water flow, remembering. The current that seemed so violent that day now looks manageable, though I know that's an illusion. Water is always exactly as powerful as conditions make it. The wisdom is in reading those conditions, in knowing when to act and when to get help. That's what I learned the day I went into water I couldn't swim in to save a child I didn't know. Fear is real and often justified. Water can kill, and not knowing how to swim is a genuine limitation. But sometimes life presents you with a moment where someone needs help, and in that moment you discover that love is faster than fear, that reaching out matters more than perfect technique, that the most important ability is availability. I think about all the hands that formed the human chain that day, Simon's expertise that guided us, the strangers who linked arms without hesitation, my family who responded instantly, even little Damon who overcame his own 7-year-old fear to run for help instead of freezing. We're all links in a chain, really. Sometimes we're the one needing rescue. Sometimes we're the anchor on shore. Sometimes we're the voice calling for help. But always, always, we're connected by our shared humanity, by the instinct that makes us reach out when someone's drowning, literal or metaphorical. The water at Willow Creek still runs fast in late spring, fed by mountain snow and winter's memory. Children still play in its shallows. Families still gather on its banks. But now there are ropes and signs and classes and awareness. Now there's a community that knows how to form a chain. And sometimes on quiet afternoons, I'll see someone standing at the water's edge, watching their child play. And they'll have that look, the one that's calculating distance and current and what ifs. Often as not, they'll glance at the plaque, then at me if I'm there, and nod. A recognition between parents, between humans, between people who understand that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is jump in, and sometimes the bravest thing is knowing how to help others jump in safely. And that's what I learned the day I couldn't swim but jumped in anyway. Not that fear doesn't matter. It does. Not that preparation doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But that when someone needs help, really needs it, you don't think about what you can't do. You just reach out and hold on tight. And if you're very lucky, if your community is strong, if humans remember their humanity, a whole chain of hands reaches back, pulling everyone to safety, reminding us all that we're stronger together than we could ever be alone. The creek still runs, Children still play, and I still don't swim with grace. But I am no longer afraid of the water. I am simply respectful of its power. I learned that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about seeing something more important than your fear. For 43 years, my story was about what I couldn't do. But in the end, on the day it mattered most, I reached. And that was enough.